Our next opening address then also doesn't need much of an introduction probably to everybody in this room. Bernard Gloster is still relatively new. I don't know if you still call yourself new, Bernard, but took up the post of Chief Executive Officer of the HSE earlier this morning. As I say, Bernard will be well known to many from his extensive career in public service and health and social care services for many years, including working with TUSLA before he rejoined the HSE. So I'm thrilled that Bernard can be here with us today to outline, I suppose, his vision for his leadership of the HSE. As I say, for the people here are people who work for you and with you, Bernard, and your organisation, and all of us as well, ourselves, our families, our loved ones, avail of the services and the care provided by the HSE. And I think that's an important piece to keep in our minds as we go through the day as well. So I'm very happy that you are here to speak to us today about your leadership and how today's conference and theme resonates with you. So thank you very much, Bernard Gloster.
Thanks, Kate, and good morning, everybody, and good morning, Robert, and thanks for those kind words. It is absolutely lovely to be talking about patients and not talking about budgets and other things. Contrary to popular opinion, the Secretary-General and I spent most of every day of the past 2 weeks actually talking about patients and services. So I think that's an important underscore. I'm very fortunate. I'm 7 months in this job, so I'll hang on to the new for another while, Kate. It gets me away with one or two things when I get into trouble, but I know that's running out. But for the 7 months I've been in this job, I have been talking about aspects of patients and service users and the public interest, and ultimately that's all that counts. And I do want to start today by saying thanks to the Department of Health led by Robert. From the very first day I met Robert, apart from the day he interviewed me for the job, but from the very first day I met Robert, it struck me enormously that he and the people he leads in the department, despite all of the narrative, they are only focused on one thing, and that's what matters to the people who need our services today and the people who need confidence in our services, that those services will be there for them in the future. And ultimately, that's all that matters. Everything else is somewhat peripheral to that. And so I'm very fortunate that we actually have a department that leads a patient safety office and function with Kate and her team, and with Rachel as the chief nurse, and the whole management board of the department, who ultimately are committed to that end. And I know that I and my colleagues in the HSE, and you'll hear later from Colm Henry, our chief clinical officer, we're very fortunate and feel very fortunate to be connected to a health system that values ultimately what matters to people. The people in the HSE will be somewhat weary-worn of hearing me for the last 7 months everywhere I turn up, saying some of the same things. But you know, sometimes the same things matter, and sometimes the same things, if we keep reminding ourselves of them, they do land somewhere. And I want to talk about just particularly the context of the subject matter we're talking about here today, and something Robert touched on, and that's culture. When I came to the HSE, I was very clear on what the priorities were and what the issues were that I felt I, working with a wonderful team of people, could respond to, and that was access to care. And we have a wonderful health and social care service, but we do have challenges in accessing it, and we have to stay focused on that. And I want to come back to the patient safety side of that in a moment. And also, of course, timely implementation, because we are enormously skilled at formulating policies and plans. The implementation of those in time is something different, and that's perhaps the part where I benefit from being a little bit impatient, and people experience my impatience, but my impatience is about getting on with it to make it good enough rather than waiting for it to be perfect. And the third thing, which patient safety constantly informs, is public confidence. Ironically, in my experience dealing with the public over a very long time in the public service, the public are ultimately concerned about the well-being of their fellow citizens and themselves. They're not so much concerned about what might be the latest gripe that appears to dominate the front page of a newspaper on any given day. They are fundamentally, we as people are concerned about our people. And so they're the things to respond to. And when I established a framework for change in the HSE, I've asked everyone to understand change and to understand work in the context of care, which is very valid and relevant to patient safety, to culture and to governance. The care bit, there are many practitioners across the health service who are experts in the care they deliver and in the professions that they work in. I have no worry about the future of that whatsoever. The governance is for me to clarify and for me to simplify, but also it's only there ultimately to give assurance and to enable. But perhaps the hardest part to elucidate and to challenge is culture. And if we want to challenge the culture of an organisation, we need to look at what is it makes up the culture of an organisation. Is this ourselves in that organisation? And so it starts with me. And while there are many dimensions to culture, perhaps the one I want to just touch on very briefly as I welcome this conference today is the culture of accepting that what we do is not perfect. It is not 100% perfect. By its very nature, it can't be. Clinical interventions are good and have great outcomes, but by their nature and by the transaction that's involved in them, they can't always be perfect. Social care interactions can be the most wonderful things for the people who experience them and the people who deliver them. Think about the 30-some residents at Middleton Community Nursing Unit yesterday who, in a moment, were flooded. And think about the care that went into looking after them yesterday evening, late last night and this morning, and the effort being made to connect to what matters to them. I heard my chief officer down there, Tess O'Donovan, on Morning Ireland this morning, saying that the first thing she was doing this morning was getting her team to go back in to make sure everything was done to retrieve the personal belongings of the residents. What a wonderful, wonderful sense of a cultural disposition of an organisation when your building is falling down and it's flooded and you have wheelchairs and trolleys moving everywhere and ambulances and you have pumps and you have dirty water. What a wonderful thing to be able to stand back and say what matters to these people. What matters to these people who can't get up and get their own belongings. And so that's just a very small dimension of what care in a culture means. And I often talk about the 2 o'clock in the morning piece. People who know me well, I saw my old colleague Mary O'Dwyer from the Midwest down there. She'd be sick of hearing me talking about the 2 o'clock in the morning. But 2 o'clock in the morning reflects such a wonderful time in the culture of our organisation, in a hospital, in a community nursing unit, in a private nursing home, or in a home setting where somebody's receiving care. I was in Harold's Cross Hospice yesterday and had the pleasure of spending some time with 2 of the patients there in the specialist palliative inpatient unit. And again, at 2 o'clock in the morning, I thought about them, because at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's no cameras, there's no managers, there's nothing. But there is that amazing relationship between the person giving the care and the vulnerability of the person who needs it and receives it. And what we have to understand when we come together to talk about patient safety is sometimes that can go wrong. Thankfully, in the majority of the time it doesn't, and we have good assurances, but it can go wrong. And it can go wrong in a way that challenges all of us, and sometimes challenges us to our very core. I don't have to remind anybody that one of the biggest radio interviews I did since I came to this job was about the Emily case, and about the need to connect the public to understand our sense of abhorrence and shock at that, but also our sense of control, that as an organisation, as a health service, we're prepared to accept it went wrong. It went wrong on our watch. We acknowledge it, we apologise for it. So as today you move through this conference and the wonderful themes of listening and learning and reflecting, I spoke at a partnership conference last week. Believe me, I don't speak at conferences every week, I don't have time. But I did speak at a patient partnership conference last week. In fact, I had the pleasure, I used the word advisedly, of being interviewed by a patient on stage for 15 minutes. I would rather do 5 rounds with Anya Lawler any day. But it was a wonderful experience. But I talked last week about very much the similar themes. When we talk about patient inclusion and when we talk about patient safety, do we listen? And when we say we've listened, well, what does that mean? Have we heard? And when we say we've heard, what does that mean? Have we acted? And when it comes to the reverse of that for us, what's the experience for the patient or for the member of the public? Was I listened to? Did I feel listened to? Was I heard? Did they act? And when we come to patient safety and we come to the far end of an incident and open disclosure, did we listen? Did we hear? Did we act? There can be nothing more important than the people we serve, and their safety must be our priority. To all of you in this room who are involved in, advocate for, and experts in the care and safety of people, thank you for what you do.